Howdy folks, Fware here. I'm going to read for you a passage, a verse from the Bible, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it and what it means to me. This may seem peculiar to you, since I don't really put much stock in what the Bible has to say, particularly as pertains the creation of the universe, of the world, and of the human species, as well as any other species, but hear me out. This is Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Taken literally, I think that this is nonsense. But taken metaphorically, I think that this is interesting, and I think that if we assume that the Bible is a work of man, a work of humans trying to document their own experience of the world, I think that this is rather poignant. Now, once upon a time I was an anthropology major. This seems like a long time ago now, and the idea of symbols and symbolism, of metaphor, and what that tells us about the human condition if we can only just analyze it, all of that is very interesting stuff to me. And so I look at the notion of God having created man in his own image, and I think of God himself being created by man in the image of man, which is what I believe to have occurred. And then I think about that and what that says about the human condition, what it says about us, and what it says about me. And then I think back to my own drives, my own desires, particularly my desire to have children. For many years, I had no interest in having children. Part of this is because my own childhood was, well, it was unfortunate at times, most of the time. And I didn't feel that I wanted to bring a child into a world where such things could happen to children. I didn't want to be responsible for bringing a child into a world that, even beyond just the experiences that I've had in my own skin, a world so full of injustice and misery. And then I think about this particular verse, and it wasn't this verse that caused it to dawn on me, but at some point I had an epiphany that relates back to it. You see, I believe that at this point in my life that children are very important, that it is important to have children, and I have every desire to do so. I mentioned briefly in a previous video that my wife and I have been trying for some time, and we have yet been unable to do so. There are, without getting into too many details, there are various physiological issues that make it difficult for us to conceive and for us to have children. But I believe that children are very important. And I'd like to explain why. The author of Genesis, in writing the passage the way that he did, so God created man in his own image, was speaking metaphorically about an impulse that we all have. All of us, when we look out onto the world, we have an image, we have an ideal. We are unique creatures in the animal kingdom in that we have consciousness and we have the ability. In fact, I would say we have an inability to turn off our need to impress our ideas upon our world. Each of us, at every moment that we experience consciousness, makes the world in his own image. All of us, you and me. And we have a desire to visit our ideas upon the world and to try to make the world a little bit more how we would like it to be. Beyond that, you get into the realm of morality, of ethics, of justice, of what my rights are versus what your rights are. But really, all any of us is trying to do is to make the world a little bit better of a place. At least what we think better ought to be. And there are differences of opinion on that matter. And that is why, first of all, ideas are important, and why communication is important. But more important even than ideas and then communication are the example that we set in our behaviors, in our actions. And there is no truer test of what kind of example we set than children. I remember being a child, and I remember very few of the things that my parents ever told me, very few of the things that they lectured me about, and very few of the things that they tried to educate me about directly by communicating them to me. However, I did learn by example many, many things. I learned how to enjoy reading a book. I learned how to smoke a cigarette. I learned I learned many, many things. How to shave, how to brush my teeth, all of those things, just from watching, just from being near them, and just from their example, from the example that they set. I learned a few other things as well. I learned how to be discerning, how to be circumspect. I learned how to think critically. These are things that are very difficult to impress upon someone by simply telling them. These are things that must be shown to have some intrinsic value, or at least intrinsic insofar as anything may be said to have intrinsic value. Intrinsic in that they increase the chances for success in the world. And so I've worked very hard to come from where I've come from. I come from very humble beginnings, and I am where I'm at now. I'm happily married. I live in a nice town, in a nice place, and I have a job that I love, and I work very hard at it. And I've come a long way from where I was. And as I get older, all of it seems to lose its meaning unless I have some way to take what values I have learned and developed throughout my lifetime, and not so much through my words, but through the example I set, see how that plays out, see if I can make my own mark on the world, and do my little bit to make the world in my image, and hope that that image is a good one. And I believe that children are the vehicle through which this happens. For most people, children are the only means of expressing themselves to the world. And a child will take from their parents what they can and express that onto the world themselves, eventually having children of their own, and this is great. Now, transient little expressions such as YouTube videos and such, all of those things are great in themselves, but ultimately they don't have that same eternal quality that the continuity of the species seems to have. I say eternal in quotes because I don't actually believe in the religious concept of eternity, but I do believe that our genetic and ideological immortality, in a sense, lies with our children. So this is why I believe that children are important and why I would like to have children. Now, I've known a lot of folks who've had kids they didn't want. I've known people who had kids that they didn't love or care about, and people who've abused their children. This to me seems terrible, terrifying. I don't understand it. When someone could be so fortunate as to have in their lives a creature who brings to them that great sense of wonder that only children have, and who renews them, who rejuvenates them, just to ignore them or to throw them away or to stifle them. I've never understood parents who don't enjoy and love their children, and to me that is very sad. And that also tends to impress itself upon those children, and that cycle tends to perpetuate itself, and to me that is unacceptable. I cannot accept that my beliefs about the world are doomed to failure at the only game that really matters, the genetic game, the game of evolution. Whereas the beliefs and values held by those who would ignore and abuse their children perpetuate themselves at a rapid rate. But nature is not fair. Nature only goes with what works. So I will continue trying. My wife and I will continue trying to have children, and hopefully one day I'll have an announcement to make. In the meantime, to those of you who have children, please remember to love them and care about them. And remember that no matter what you tell them, they will only learn from your example. And to those of you who do not have children, please look kindly on those who do. And if you choose to have children someday, just remember to love them. Good luck. Take care.